You likely imagine all your medications come from a place like this, a gleaming pharmaceutical factory filled with workers decked out in masks and gowns, diligently and carefully making prescription drugs. And that all those medications that end up at your local pharmacy come from factories that have been inspected by the FDA. But that's not always the case. An Associated Press analysis of FDA records found that government inspectors have not returned to nearly 2,000 factories due for a safety surveillance inspection.
There's supposed to be an inspection that's done every couple of years, and it's important because the way you can think about it is there's this idea of trust but verify.
During the COVID-19 pandemic, inspections plummeted. Now, a lot of that's understandable. A lot of us were traveling much less during the pandemic. But as we emerged from the pandemic, the inspections didn't recover. Even today, the FDA has not inspected at the same levels as it did before the COVID pandemic. I was hoping current FDA inspections would be higher than pre-COVID because I thought the FDA would be catching up, but they're still behind.
Making it even harder is that many factories are now abroad.
The supply chain was already very tenuous and complicated even before the pandemic, and the pandemic unveiled just how fragile it was.
One example is this factory in India that makes cancer therapies and other essential drugs. In 2022, inspectors visited for the first time in nearly 3 years. They reported a cascade of failure with the plant's quality control systems, including an employee destroying official documents by pouring acid into a trash bin.
It is a little wonder that in the absence of regulatory inspections and actions that we've seen numerous quality control failures in imported drugs.
It is past time the FDA addresses these issues. People's lives depend on it.
Maybe some pressure from Congress on FDA leaders will help them put pressure on internally. But if we realize that the FDA is just not going to be able to get this job done, then we need the American people to know that.
The FDA has not offered a date for when these uninspected factories might be reviewed. The agency says they are prioritizing inspections that pose the greatest risk to public health.
But there's no question it's more complicated if it's coming from other parts, and we have a lot of work to do as long as the marketplace is working the way it is, to do as much as we can to help other countries achieve the standards that are necessary.
As the backlog of uninspected factories continues, some experts question whether FDA's decades-old approach of in-person inspections is still working.
The failure of the FDA's Office of Pharmaceutical Quality to go out and inspect these establishments is a public health concern. We need the FDA to conduct these inspections, or we need some other mechanism to ensure the safety and efficacy of these medicines.